Hi, this is Gautamveer Bhatia, and I welcome you all back to episode 1 of the Mindful GB podcast. Today, I am lucky to be joined by Aditya Khandwe, who is an absolutely amazing classical musician. Let's dive deep and talk to him and learn what he is all about. So, Aditya ji, let's get started to talk about how your family has influenced you. I've often noticed that they often for musical families, it's that professional musical musicians are able to come out. And what was your experience? How has your family helped you in your process on your journey of becoming a musician? And what were your early days like? What was like your practice, and what did you enjoy about music, and how did this whole journey start?
Okay, first of all, Gautamveer, it's my pleasure to be on this platform discussing things with you. Begin with, my mother influenced me a lot to get into music. First of all, when I started hearing or listening to music, it was just fun for me. I used to mimic compositions which my mother used to sing during her riyas, and that's where my mother thought that, how is he mimicking so well? There must be something, some talent somewhere in some ways. So my father also was, really influenced and really intrigued into how am I able to just mimic. I mean, it was just a play, some sort of a game, sport for me to just, make fun. And then I used to derive a lot of pleasure out of it. So then she started, little by little, just singing in front of me, and I could recite those bandishes and learn them just while I was playing, running around here and there. So that's how my initial, days of music were. But I think I started seriously learning music from my mother by the time I was 7.5 years of age. So that was a time when I used to sit for like 15-20 minutes at one place and learn the bandish, and then just go out play like most of the kids did.
Yeah.
So after that, this happened till I was like 12, 13 years old. So after that, because of change in voice, which every male has to undergo, during his teenage. So that's when I was put into serious discipleship of Pandit Ratnakar Paiji. I was really, really fortunate to, be his student. I mean, because I was the youngest in his flock of students. So which is why everybody used to really find it very, intriguing, amusing, curious, so many things, that how is this kid performing? Because I still remember in my first Guru Purnima, I actually used a female Tanpura and started singing. So people down of the hall were saying, who's this new girl who's learning from you? So she's really very surila and all of those things. So Guruji also said in a playful mood, just go up. She looks also very beautiful. You'll find her very beautiful. Please go up. So then when people came up, they saw me. I was just a kid and performing. So that's how it was. And then I learned from Pandit Ratnakar Pai ji for good 12 years, 10 to 12 years. Out of which I think 4 or 5 years were spent only in getting my voice back on track to sing, because it was a very long phase for me to, get, because when the voice changes, you really have to go again at level 1 and then start retraining yourself, because your voice totally becomes very different from what it was previously. So that's how I got back into the game. And then after like 4-5 years, and out of those, I think 2.5 years, I could stay at his house and learn music. So that was, I think, my greatest experience, I would say, because he taught me how to tune a tanpura and many other things, because I couldn't sing much because my range was limited back then. So he said, sur mein rehne ke liye bahut zaruri hai ye cheez. So that's why he used to ask me to tune all the tanpuras of everybody who used to come to Talim.
Right.
Be it be a ladies tanpura or a gents tanpura, any pitch, anything. Just
Right.
take some. He used to have that whistle, which was tuned in a particular pitch, and I used to just blow, and there used to come a sound, and from that sound I used to tune the first sa string, and then from that string, taking reference, I used to tune all the other strings, and that's how tanpura used to be tuned, because harmonium player wasn't because it was a privilege or a luxury to have a harmonium player in every talim. Nobody used to have that in those days.
All right.
So that is how I was learning from Pandit Ratnakar Paiji, and parallelly I also started learning from Pandit Yashwant Bua Joshi ji as well. And Pai Guruji thought that I should learn these nuances of Gwalior Gharana as well, because my mother also belongs to Gwalior Gharana, and she also was a disciple of Pandit Yashwant Bua Joshi for a very long period of time. So he said there are some things of Gwalior in your voice or in your singing style, so you should actually hone them and sharpen them. That's why you should go to a person who actually could teach you Gwalior exclusively. So in my case, I was learning Jaipur Atrauli exclusively and Gwalior exclusively while I was in my teenage. And then after both of them passed away, I then started learning from Gani Yogini Dhondutai Kulkarni ji, where I underwent an advanced training for Jaipur Atrauli Gharana. And currently I'm learning from Pandit Ulhas Kashalkar ji.
So, as you said that you spent about 2 years at your Guruji's house. So, I feel this is a common characteristic amongst many musicians, that they spend time at their Guru's house to learn from them. Now, what are like the specific things that you gain from living at someone's house all the time? And what are the things you learn? And also, like, what was the experience like?
I think there were a lot of non-verbal teachings which were involved while I was staying with him, because there are a lot of things which a guru might not explicitly say or tell you, but just by mere observation you tend to learn a lot. And that is where I think staying with Guruji or the traditional Gurukul Shikshan Paddhati, as it is said, is I think, or has been, will be, still is, I think, the game changer for you to become a very good performer or a very good singer. I would not necessarily say a performer, because becoming a performer also involves a lot of other things which are over and above how much you learn. But I think the learning experience which you get is, you don't just learn music from your guru, you also are watching him or her, how he or she stands, how he or she walks, how he or she thinks music, how he or she eats, how he or she conducts himself or herself. So there are so many, things which you tend to learn, which help to understand the musical persona of your guru.
Right.
So that's, I think, the biggest factor. And another important factor is that you are 24/7 in music. Somebody comes, learns, you hear it, and subconsciously you tend to learn a lot of things. Probably some weaknesses which are your strengths, maybe somebody else's weaknesses, and how they are countered. And that also can give you an idea of how you can further strengthen your strengths, or further you can accentuate your strong points of your singing.
Right.
So these are some things which I feel are very peculiar about the traditional Gurukul Shikshan Paddhati.
So, you spoke about how you were training under 2 gharana systems at the same time.
Yeah.
So, firstly, I'd like you to talk about the gharana system for our viewers who won't particularly understand what the gharana system is.
Okay. Gharana system or gharana basically means ghar ana. Okay, which actually in its literal sense means a school of thought. Usually it is said that unless and until you have 3 to 4 generations in the family singing the same style of music, it cannot be termed as a gharana.
Yeah.
And so there are like really old gharanas. It starts from the Kawal Bacche gharana, and then you come to Gwalior, and then you have an offshoot of it, like Agra, then you have Jaipur Atrauli Gharana, of course, then you have Kirana Gharana. So basically Gwalior, Jaipur, Agra and Kirana, these are like 4 principal gharana, I would say. Principal gharanas, but then there are also a lot of other offshoots, like you have Indore gharana, you have Kapurthala gharana, you have Sham Chaurasi as well, you have Talwandi gharana as well in Punjab. Then you also have Banaras gharana in classical music, of course. Not talking of tabla, classical vocal music.
Yeah.
You also have in Mewati gharana as well. Then you also have Rampur Seswan gharana, which is an offshoot of Gwalior. So there are many such, gharanas which are relatively newer or relatively lesser known, maybe. But gharana necessarily means a unique school of thought. There may be different people having different styles in the same gharana, but all of them follow the same value system in the gharana, same principles in that gharana. So if I'm talking of Gwalior, then there would be this Ashtang Pradhan Gaiki and the tempo of the bandishes and the repertoire of thekas or rhythmic cycles, which are employed for singing bandishes, would also be very different. The tempos of those rhythmic cycles or thekas, as we call it, would also be very different. Jaipur Gharana necessarily is known for its Akar Yukt Gaiki. I mean, these are like really crude or basic fundamental differences I'm talking about, because there is like lots and lots and lots of really subtle and subtle differences, which only if you start learning, you would actually come to know. Then I think the way in which Jaipur Atroli Gharana singers sing their tans and the alap also is of a particular tempo always. It's not a standalone, note after note after note after note after note kind of a thing. Usually you'll find one common thing in Gwalior as well as Jaipur Gharana is they mainly employ phrases and not just standalone notes while singing some rags. That is why you will find that some gharanas prefer some rag, or in some gharanas, some rags are sung, more frequently than maybe the other gharana. So that is why people tend to say ki ye rag inke gharane ka hai. Actually, that's not really true, because every rag can be sung in every gharana. It is. So only thing is that the teachings or the education or the style of singing makes the artist prefer some rags and not prefer some rags, which is fine, which is okay. So talking of gharanas again, if you find Kirana, their voice production also is very different as compared to the other gharanas. Then when and also the tempo of the bandishes is really slow when it comes to Kirana. You will find many thekas also, used in Kirana Gharana, especially the modern masters like Pandita Prabhatre ji and Bhimsen Joshi ji and Gangubai ji and many other people. Now we also have Pandit Kaivalya Kumar Gurav ji as well of Kirana, who also happens to learn, more than one Gharana. So there you will find that the tempo is still maintained of Kirana. So that's where the Gharana actually becomes a little different here. So that is why the value system of Kirana Gharana would be different from the value system of Jaipur, would be different from value system of Gwalior, would be different from value system of Agra. Agrewalas you'll find having a very peculiar kind of a voice production, and their expressive nature of their music is their, thing, and the poetic sense of their compositions is also one beautiful thing. And I think you will hardly find any Agra Gharana singer who's not a composer. That's the beauty of their teachings and training. Everybody can compose bandishes. Everybody is really good with language, first of all, good with taranas, good with the rhythm side of composition as well, and rhythm side of music as such. So that is one very important feature or important value, and which is why you will see that there are like thousands and thousands of bandishes which are composed in Agra Gharana.
So, as you've spoken about the Gharana system, or the Gharana as you say, how has this evolved over the years? Because this is an ancient system as far as I suppose.
Absolutely.
So how has it changed over time with the advent of technology?
I feel that the values have remained the same, but the style has changed from person to person.
Hmm.
So if you talk of Gwalior Gharana itself, you will find various streams in Gwalior Gharana. For example, you will find that the disciples or the group of disciples and disciples of Pandit Vishnu Digambar Paluskar ji have a different style of singing. You will find that Pandit D.V. Paluskar ji, belonging to Gwalior Gharana, also sings in a different style, but the value system is the same. Then you will find another stream coming from Nisar Hussain Khan Sahab Gwalior wale, and then Shankar Rao Pandit ji, then Krishna Rao Pandit ji, and the Pandit dynasty of disciples as well. You have Pandit Sarat Chandra Arolkar, nowadays L.K. Pandit ji and his daughter Meera Pandit, and that lineage of style of Gwalior Gharana. Then you will have a different style of Gwalior Gharana from Pandit Anant Manohar Joshi ji as well. It will be a totally different style of Gwalior Gharana being sung. Then you will also have Pandit Mirashi Bua's style of singing Gwalior Gharana. It's a very different style.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been evolving over a lot of time. Similarly, you will have Jaipur as well. There are various streams of different styles of Jaipur Gharana. You know, if you see Mogubai Kurdikar ji has a very different style of singing Jaipur Bandishes. Kesarbai Kirkar ji has a very, very diametrically different style of singing Jaipur Atroli Gharana's music. The values are the same, only the style has changed. You also had, or you still have Pandita Lakshmibai Jadhav ji, who was a Darbar Gaik of the Royal Court of Baroda.
Mm.
You know, so she also had a very different style of singing, but they were Jaipur Atroli Gharana itself, because even Lakshmibai ji had a talim from Ustad Aladia Khan Sahab's brother, Ustad Haider Khan Sahab. So we cannot really challenge the authenticity of talim, of course. But the style was different. Then you have Kishori Taiji and their style being a little different, but being in the same Gharana. Then you have, the Sadolikers, Shruti Tai and their father, their uncle. They also have a different style of, singing. So even if Gharana's value systems have remained the same, there are still these many different streams of styles of singing, which is where the Gharana system is still being followed and will be followed, in my opinion.
So, as you spoke, that the Gharana system has also been evolving over time. So, would it be right to say that, the purity of the Gharana has changed, and if the original form of the Gharana has been evolving, so where do you think is the line between evolution and maintaining what the original was? Where's the line drawn? Because while maintaining the original and having evolution, there needs to be a balance between them, or what's your opinion?
I think there always has been that line. I mean, people haven't really crossed the line of challenging the value system itself. Nobody has done that ever. Yes, there are different styles because of different, voices, basically. Because every human is born with a unique voice. Let's say Agra Gharana. You have Vilayat Hussain Khan Sahab and his lineage of disciples having a different style. You have Pandit Jitendra Abhisheki, who just changed entirely. I mean, there was a paradigm shift when it came to singing Agra Gharana. People thought that it's a very different kind of a tone, and Abhisheki ji sang music with the same system of values. But because of his style, it appealed to the people so much that it gained popularity in a very short span of time. I mean, I think in 70s, I think every male singer wanted to sound like either Pandit Bhimsen Joshi ji or Pandit Jitendra Abhisheki ji, two of them being from a different gharana again. Now, Bhimsen Joshi ji also brought a change in his style, because pure Kirana was sounding different, but he was also a performer, and there were a lot of changes during his career as a performer, because technology came in, microphones, this, that, and many other things came in. So which is why the style also happened to undergo a massive change.
So is this a good thing?
I think it is. As long as you are keeping the value system intact, I don't think there is a problem.
One of the things that really interested me about you was your passion of music and your career as a professional musician. But then at the same time, you're also teaching management. So how do these two paths go together? Like, do they run in parallel? And how do you what's the balance between both the paths? Do you get enough time to pursue music? And yeah.
I think there are two things in this. First is discipline and the other is time management. I can do my, other work which I do to earn my daily bread. So basically my objective of getting into, pursuing a different career apart from music was that I wanted to learn music in the most correct way possible without having pressure to perform outside, earn money out of it, so that I can just focus on gaining knowledge as much as possible. So which is where it was like that since I was in school. So I also had to perform in academics and do music parallelly. And music has always been there. I mean, I've changed a lot of jobs. I mean, changed industry to industry. So that hardly didn't matter. But I think it made me more disciplined in my approach to life as such. Because if I know that I have these 4 hours assigned for my riyaz, I know that I will not be getting any other time in the day. So for me, the typical idiomatic phrases like "abhi mood nahi hai" weren't there. So I had to be disciplined enough to, be there at that time and focus on music, and at the same time, when I'm doing something else, be there and focus on it. So it also, I think, it also kind of brings a lot of freshness in my thinking of music, because I am doing something really opposite of music.
Right.
So which is why when I come, I'm coming there to the riyaz with a very clean slate of my mind. I am not really, carrying the baggage of pichle riyaz mein maine kya kiya. Of course, there are some things if I'm working on a certain aspect of music. Let's say if I'm working on a certain taan in a certain rag, then I definitely remember it. Ki bhai, pichle time yahan pe ye choda tha. Because I think riyaz has nothing to do with time. Riyaz is a theme. And you keep working in it. Even if you sit for 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 16 hours. If it is not done with proper direction and focus, I think even 16 ghante ka riyaz is of no meaning at all.
So basically, when it comes to riyaz, it's quality over quantity.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And it has always been the case.
Right. And
even for the people who are doing full-time music. Absolutely.
And for the students pursuing music, what would be your advice to them? Because there are lot riyaz maybe for a lot of students is the toughest part to do. And so what should be the driving force behind riyaz? Is it the love for music that's the driving force behind riyaz, or is it determination, dedication, or is it a mix of these things?
I think it's only about pursuit of perfection. Because, see, there are two things in music. You like to sing and you like to practice. So liking to practice is a different thing, which is, I think, most important if you really want to become a good singer. Because in your riyaz, you basically work on your shortcomings primarily. You also, further accentuate your strengths and many other things. You take it to a different level. Agreed. But mainly the riyaz should be done only to minimize or diminish your weaknesses, because it cannot happen over a day, over 15 days, over a month. You don't know. It's just a theme. If I know that I have to master a particular aspect of singing, that is, let's say, sapatta. So I practice sapatta, and I don't know how many days it will take for me to master the sapatta. So I have to give that kind of time. I think there are two things: pursuit of perfection, and the second thing is consistency. If I'm practicing every day 2 hours without fail, I think there are higher chances of me becoming a better singer than the person who's not practicing for 6 days, and on the 7th day is practicing for 13-14 hours.
Right.
Because there is no consistency, which is why there is no line of thought in your riyaz. Because even if you are doing 2 hours every day, or let alone 2 hours, 1 hour every day, but if you are consistent enough, then your thoughts are better aligned as compared to the others who are not consistent in their riyaz. 4-5 दिन मनी नहीं हुआ, 6वें दिन बैठ गए, फिर 7-8-9-10 दिन मनी नहीं हुआ. Doesn't make any sense. Honestly. So I think 2 very, very important things are pursuit of perfection, and second thing is consistency. I think these are 2 most important things which drive you to do riyaz. Love for music can also be pursued without doing riyaz. People do it.
Yeah.
Family gathering, they just sing, everybody says, wow, wow, bahut achhe, maza aa gaya. That's it. Fair enough. But if you really want to do something with the art, then you have to give that kind of focus, that kind of, that kind of time required to perfect something. And more importantly, I feel that in riyaz, over a period of time, it also, converts into sadhana. And then for some people, it also goes beyond sadhana.
Right.
So basically, you learn, then you unlearn, and then you relearn. As Zakir Bhai always says, I think these 3 words are like etched on my heart, and I'll be following them till the last breath of my life. Because that's a very nice thing about riyaz, because these are like 3 phases in which your riyaz should be divided if you want to, grow as an artist, mature as an artist.
But then again, the thing is with riyaz, with practice, it's an essential part of a classical musician's daily routine.
Any musician, let
right.
alone classical.
Right. But then, especially classical musicians, for them, it needs to be a part of their lives, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yes.
But then the thing is with classical musicians, riyaz, or practice, it represents more of an inward journey and more of your internal development than external development, right? Because there are so many, I'm sure there are so many people, and especially with the type of music that's popular in today's day and age, there are so many people who aren't working even half as hard aren't doing half as much practice as a classical musician, as a Hindustani classical musician, or as a matter of fact, any classical musician. But then again, classical musician or classical music isn't the thing that's popular right now. So, especially in general society, it's not the common thing that's everywhere, right? It's pop music, say hip hop music. So,
I think it has to do with life.
Right.
It has to do with life. Do you think disciplined life is a popular thing in society?
Not at all.
You have my answer.
Undisciplined life is the most popular thing in society today.
You have my answer.
Yeah.
So other music, of course, you have, disciplines in different, facets. For example, ghazal requires a discipline of better pronunciation of poetry as well.
Right.
Then in hip-hop, pop, you hardly find any good poetry, really.
Right.
So, which is why there is no discipline as such.
Right.
So, people like it. Fair enough. It's their choice how they want to lead their life. If they feel that only adrenaline rush is the best thing for them, fair enough. Over a period of time, these are the people who really, realize that calmness is also a very important thing in life. And then they slowly start turning to classical music.
Right.
I have my own school friends who weren't there into classical music while we were in school, but now their kids are learning tabla. Some people are staying in US and teaching their kids tabla and Indian classical vocal music and sitar and many other things.
But then again, as you said that the most important part of riyaz or practice is that you improve or you better on your flaws. But then again, you need the guidance of a guru to make you do riyaz that's actually beneficial.
Yes. 100%.
So it's quite possible to be practicing the wrong thing.
Oh yes, absolutely. If you are not guided properly, I think getting a good guru is as important as doing your riyaz.
How does one go about that?
I think it's more to do with the trial and error method. You
Yeah.
try to find some people whom you can relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because every gharana is not everybody's cup of tea. There are some people who learn only Gwalior. There are some people who learn only one gharana. There are people like Pandit Ulhas Kashalkar ji, who happens to be my guru. His guru, Pandit Gajanan Joshi ji. Then nowadays you also have Pandit M. Venkatesh Kumar ji, who has learned from two gharanas. You have Pandit Kaivalya Kumar Gurav ji, who has learned from two gharanas. So there are not many artists who have learned from more than one gharana. So that is a difficult thing to master. Because you really have to understand, first of all, how to keep these nuances of each gharana separate, and in the next level, how can you blend them in such a way that it appears to be a seamless experience to the audience.
Right. So now moving gears, talking about a different topic, is there a lack of accessibility of Indian classical music for people to listen? Because personally, I've had the experience that Apple Music and Spotify, which are the most popular music streaming apps right now, there's a total lack of Indian classical music on those platforms. And to listen to good Indian classical music, you really need to search for it. So, is that a factor as to why Indian music is not that popular?
I think it has to do with a lot of things, right? Nowadays, search engine optimization or SEO is something which really plays a very vital role in these things. I mean, because classical music is not so popular, so it is not highly searched for.
Right.
And there are so many other things. But you will find the people who want to listen to classical music will listen to classical music anyhow. Because you also have a lot of material available nowadays on Apple Music as well when it comes to classical music. You have Rashid Bhai's material, you have my Guruji Ulhas ji's material available, you have Rajan Sajan Mishra ji's material available. So there is ample amount of material available. But if somebody says that I want to listen to some Rahimat Khan Saab's recording, wherein recording itself was very rare, so it then becomes very difficult.
Right.
But then with the advent of YouTube, I think there are lots and lots of rare rags as well which are available. I think Manjari Asnare Kelkar ji has done a wonderful job when it came to a series which she has done for rare rags which she has learned under the aegis of Jaipur Ratoli Gharana, under the discipline of Jaipur Ratoli Gharana from her gurus. So there is a lot of material available. So I think it's the listeners and students' prerogative to, search it more and more and listen to it. So
as a musician yourself, what do you feel is like your role to propagate classical music more, or what is that which can be done to make classical music more widespread, or is classical music always like going to be a very niche thing that only a certain people listen to because it's tough to understand classical music maybe?
I don't think it's tough, but it requires a different mindset.
Right.
It's not a very, common thing to listen to classical music. Classical music requires some kind of tuning to one's ear. And it's a different audible tuning which is required. But once that tuning is done, then the person doesn't listen to any other form of music but classical. I mean, I have seen these one-way entries into the world of classical music and they just don't want to listen to any other thing. I mean, I have a lot of my colleagues who had come to my concert and then gave me the feedback कि हमने पहली बार सुना लेकिन ये इतना peaceful experience था कि हम इसको बार-बार सुनना चाहेंगे.
So the selling point of classical music is peace.
I don't think classical music can be sold
Right,
as such.
right.
It's more to do with the experience which it provides.
And that's the
The
experience
moment
of peace.
selling comes into providing experience, I think therein lies the problem. Then classical music doesn't remain, or it kind of shifts from its main point, that is soul searching. There is a very beautiful word in Sanskrit which is called as Atmaranjan. So basically classical music is for Atmaranjan. It's for soul searching. You tend to, even for the audience, It's like that. It's not just you have to be somebody who's practicing classical music and only then it would be an Atmaranjan for you. That is not the case. Even the audience can actually experience Atmaranjan if they are really immersed into listening to classical music to that level. And it requires some years of practice of listening to classical music as well. Because it's a different form of music. It cannot be just like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 and the kid suddenly starts listening to classical music. Because it's not like that. It requires certain maturity, which is why you will see that kids below the age of 12 may not listen to classical music like a person of the age maybe 30, 35 or maybe 40. But I think creating the environment in homes, in schools is very important, which I think the new education policy is actually doing.
Right.
Or at least they have proposed this to be done.
So how do you think it's going to like affect the way kids are, affect the way classical music like propagates, and how is it going to affect society as a whole if like music is like made compulsory for kids to learn?
I think the stress levels of kids would come drastically down.
Right.
And we'll find a lesser number of kids or the society succumbing to depression and many other mental health issues basically.
Right.
Because I don't know whether you know or not, but in the olden years, classical musicians really had to go through extreme hardships.
Yeah.
I think I had heard in one of the discourses by Shri Pula Deshpande, P.L. Deshpande ji, when he was talking about Pandit Ramakrishna Bua Vazhe. He's popularly known as Vazhe Bua and has done immense work in performing music as well as teaching and as well as, composing the bandishes, printing musical bandishes and making it available to the people at large, society at large. So that person actually had a concert. He used to live in Pune and he had a concert in Mumbai. So he only had money to travel from Pune to Kalyan in train. So he came to Kalyan and then he just, spread some chadar or some dari, some sheet kind of a thing and sat on it and started singing. Just like that. And people, on the station just looked at him and just started murmuring, Bhikhari hai, lekin classical to bahut acha ga raha hai. And they started, putting coins in front of him. So after some time he stopped singing. He had like 9 rupees with him back then. He ate good chana of 4 rupees and 5 rupees were required for him to travel to Mumbai from Kalyan. So 5 rupees he went to the ticket counter, purchased the ticket, went, performed, and that's how people have, lived their life. Bhimsen Joshi ji had to literally lift gallons and gallons of waters and do a lot of undergo a lot of physical hardships in order to just get to learn music. Hari Prasad Chaurasia ji had to just go to Annapurna ji's house and wait outside her doors for months and months before she could agree to finally teach him. So that was the kind of passion these people have had. So I think you can really understand how, there was every possibility that they could get distressed or they could undergo depression and, these newfound things nowadays. But they did not. And you find them everywhere in the world. I think there is hardly a conference which happens without Hariji if it's to do with instrumental music or music as such. So I think it will change the society's perception of leading a holistic life, and that's where I think classical music, be it Hindustani or Carnatic classical music for that matter, can make a massive difference in the quality of life of society, I feel.
So what I'm getting like from your conversation here is that the theme of being a classical music is one of perseverance and determination, because like even once, like when you haven't even started learning, all these great musicians have gone through so many hardships, and then once you start learning, then once again you have to have that determination and that love and just perseverance to just do that practice, do that riyaz, listen to your guru.
Yes, I agree with you.
So classical
Okay.
music, then it's like a double-edged sword, you could say. In one way, it's a matter of extreme determination and extreme perseverance. But then on the other hand, it's also about love and the peace it brings you.
I think extreme determination and extreme love, I think, is applicable to every facet of or every aspect of life.
Right.
Can you say that cricket can be mastered without love and determination? I don't think.
Not
If
at
you
all.
could understand the life of maybe somebody like a Sachin Tendulkar,
Yeah.
or maybe somebody like a Virat Kohli,
Yeah.
or maybe somebody like a Sunil Gavaskar, you could very easily make that they were also determined. They were also in pursuit of perfection.
Right.
You could also read Bill Gates or Warren Buffett's biography, and you'll understand that even they were in the tryst of, they were also, having that fondness to perfection
Right.
and love towards what they were doing. Steve Jobs is another example wherein I think he was the one who was also fond of creativity along with perception. So that's where you found a totally different dimension to electronic items. Only people who have that pursuit of perfection and that longingness to be perfect in whatever they do, even the smallest of the things, I think that is where things actually start to happen for you. It's not only in music, but I think it's everywhere in life.
But then again, right, that's an inherent quality and not something that can be like, not something that you can learn, or according to you think it can be learned, or you can
Yes,
be
it can
trained.
be cultivated, of course.
Right.
You watch people around you, how they are practicing, how hard they are practicing, and the results because of it. You can still do it. Or there is another thing that some people actually compel you to do it. कि भाई
Right.
इतने घंटे रियाज करो वरना खाना नहीं मिलेगा.
Right.
That can also be done. There are some ustads, who have done such kind of things for them, their own selves. They call it chilla. They sit for days and days and days together, only focusing on one aspect, and then they don't really meet people. Somebody comes in the room, just puts their lunch or dinner there and then goes out. They really cut themselves off from the world, and they just get into their inner self to master something or think about something, if not master. And that is also one thing which is there.
So then again, this is applicable to all parts of life.
Oh
right?
yes, absolutely.
And wanting perfection or wanting greatness or wanting to achieve something big in anything requires this kind of determination,
Oh, yes.
focus, right? And we see so many entrepreneurs, they like cut off themselves, and especially the ones who built these big companies. So they cut off themselves and then they just go and think, and they are alone. And then this is like really inspiring. So I think we can conclude that like we can learn a lot for life through music as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. There are so many great compositions. You will find some spiritual compositions. You will find some compositions wherein they are giving you lessons of life. So many different things.
Right. Then again, talking about music in the present age as it is right now, there have been attempts to make classical music more widespread. And one of the ways that this is being done is through fusion music. And as you said before, that music is being changed to sell it. So, do you think fusion music is classical music? It's a part of classical music, or it's separate? Do you think fusion music, like Indian classical fusion music, is a good thing, bad thing? Like, what are your views? And what are your views on, like, except fusion music, other than fusion music, other ways being used to make classical music more widestream?
I think fusion music is a different form of music. First of all, we have to understand that and not confuse it with classical music.
Right.
Because fusion music's main aspect is the sound which is produced
Right.
in that music. So, which is why more than purity of rag and many other things, what they mainly focus on is the type of sound or the kind of sound which is produced. That is why you find a lot of artists experimenting in their instruments, which could produce different sounds, and they have been successful in it. Some people, try to create different material which is played in fusion. You would never find somebody playing that material in a classical concert.
Right.
So, for you to create something in fusion, you have to have some background of classical music for sure.
Right.
I think for me, if you ask, I think to be there in any other form of music, I think classical music is a quintessential thing. It's like doing MBBS for doctors.
Right.
If you want to be a surgeon, if you want to be a physician, if you want to be a consultant physician, if you want to be just a general practitioner, you can choose it after you do MBBS.
Right.
So I think classical music could, very, very well be synonym to an MBBS degree of sorts.
Right. So, what are your thoughts, but like on the different ways like classical music is being changed to like the popular, like to the majority of the people's hearing? Because as you mentioned, classical music is not everyone's cup of tea, right?
Correct.
It's not easy for everyone to listen to it. So in the present day and age, people are employing different methods to, tweak classical music, or maybe have like a, bada khayal, chota khayal, and then after that have a short, not actually short, but like then half the concert consists of like, original pure classical. And then after that, under the guise of classical music, it's a different type of music to attract wider audiences. So do you think this is valid to do to make classical music more popular? Or what are your thoughts on this?
See, in my personal view, I tend to, have a different setup for other forms of music,
Right.
and other setup for classical.
Right.
I very rarely, try to perform some other form of music in my classical concert. If somebody really, asks me to do us, if somebody, places a farmaish, especially there are some senior people who've been knowing you since a long time and they know you sing a certain composition in this form of music very well, and they request, and then you really have to honor it.
Right.
But if somebody asks my personal choice, I really like to keep classical music as classical music and other forms of music as other forms of music. And I think that is how it should be, because it really kind of avoids the adulteration of thoughts,
Right.
when it comes to performance.
Right.
Because if you are singing classical and if the next aspect is, being thumri, and your mind have already started wandering in the thumri thoughts. So there could also be a chance that you might, get into the phrases which are more thumri numa than
Right.
classical as such.
Right.
There is a chance, but it rarely happens. I mean, there are a lot of artists. You have Pandita Ashwini Bhede Deshpande ji,
Right.
and Pandita Devki Pandit ji. You have Rajan Sajan Mishra ji who used to sing bhajans in their classical concerts. I think Sajan Mishra ji even now would be singing bhajans in the classical concert. But they have really mastered that idea of keeping these forms very different, distinct from each other.
Right.
If you can do that, then no problem. If you can't, I guess better refrain
Right.
from it.
Right. And what do you think is like the future of classical music?
I think it's bright.
Like for the next 15, 20, 30 years?
50 years, I would say it's bright.
Right.
There are so many, youngsters who are coming up who learning music.
Right.
I mean, nowadays, because of your, bloom of online tools and online platforms, you have people learning from Indians from all over the world,
Right.
and vice versa
Right.
as well. So if I want to learn jazz music from some American or European jazz artist, I can actually do that.
Right.
So that is where I think the reach of learning experiences of classical music has also grown multifold times.
Right.
So there is a multitude of opportunities for people to actually learn music. The only thing is that the amount of seriousness they put in to learn.
Right.
I think as long as you're serious, everything will fall in place.
Apart from learners, what do you think about the listeners part of it? Because learners, listeners, performers all form this community, right?
Correct.
Of classical music.
Absolutely.
And all three are essential parts to keep this art form alive. So what do you think about listeners, and why is it that there are older listeners, and how like what's the way to make classical music attractive to younger listeners? Or as you said before, is it too mature the form of music for certain younger people to understand? Are there certain barriers preventing younger people from understanding classical music?
I think the only barrier which is preventing them is the younger people not coming to listen to concerts.
Right.
I mean, it's a very common observation. Maybe even you would have observed. Classical matlab yaar wo sirf karte hain bas. So I think if that preconceived notion is broken somewhere, and if the young population starts to, expose themselves to this form, I think it would be very, very achievable. I mean, what you say.
Right.
Because nowadays there are a lot of young audiences, which are seen in the concert circuits.
Right.
It's not just the elders.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean the elders are there, no doubt about
Right.
it. But if you go to a rather younger places where you find people, especially in cities like Mumbai, Delhi, you'll find a lot of young audience getting in Pune as well, Kolkata.
Right.
So, wherein there is always an environment or atmosphere of classical music, you will find youngsters attending, music festivals and concerts and all of that. Yes, the number is relatively small, but if you compare some 20-25 years back, you will see that the number of youngsters attending concert has definitely increased over a
Right.
period of time.
Right.
And especially nowadays, because of the online concerts happening, people actually could be in their comforts of their homes and they can listen.
And about online concerts, do you think there's any, because with YouTube right now, there are so many videos available of people like great artists performing in, say, 4K with absolutely amazing audio quality. So do you think anyone would find a difference between listening to a YouTube video, like a recorded YouTube video, versus a live online concert? And do you think there's a future or there's a space for online concerts post the pandemic? Now that we are done with the pandemic, do you think there's a space and do you think there's an audience for listening to online concerts?
Absolutely. Absolutely, there is a space for online live concerts again.
Right.
Not recorded though.
Right.
I think there could also be a space which could be created for live content only. Don't keep it, post it on YouTube after the concert is over.
Right.
It happens, it's gone. That's it.
Right.
I mean, there are many places in India and abroad wherein you are not just allowed to record any music, because this music thrives on live experience.
Right.
Basically, that is why you still have recordings of greats like Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab, Kesar Bhai Ji, Amir Khan Sahab, and Krishna Rao, Shankar Pandit Ji, and many other greats of yesteryears, current modern years. You still, people prefer going to live concert and get that live experiences, because the form basically thrives on the live experiences of the audience.
And how do you think the art form in itself is going to evolve within the next 50 years? Because the thing is, when we look at Western classical music, the whole point of Western classical music is that it has been notated, right? And that exact same thing which has been written by the composer is going to be replicated by the person. They might have some part of expression, like how hard or how soft they hit the key of the piano, but it's very little. Whereas in Indian classical music, especially in Khayal Gaiki, there's a huge, maximum part is improvisation, right? So do you think it's going to evolve in a certain way because of the fact that there's so much improvisation involved?
Absolutely. Because of its improvisation being its key, it has been passed on since thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
So it would be created because it's not confining itself to somebody's way of thinking.
Right.
Bandish definitely is pre-composed. I'm not denying it.
Right.
But the embellishment of the bandish is not pre-composed, cannot be pre-composed when it comes to Hindustani classical music.
Right.
And that is where the beauty is. I think you singing the bandish and I singing the same bandish will be very different.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody else, a third person singing that bandish would again be different.
Right.
In fact, even if you would have had talim from the same guru, there would still be some degree of difference.
Because that personal expression.
Exactly the point.
Right. And lastly, as our concluding talk, I'd like to talk about what are your future goals, or what's your goal as a musician? Would you like to pursue it full time in the future? Or what's your final goal? Or there is no final goal within music?
I think there is no final goal. I don't want to put it that way. I am enjoying music to the fullest, right. And I want to keep enjoying my music to the fullest. And there are so many things which I haven't reached those avenues as yet. Right. So I'm in pursuit of them and I'm practicing my art.
Right.
and trying to, getting better at it day after day after day. So I think I'm enjoying that process as of
Right.
now, and I want to keep it enjoying.
So music is just a process.
Yes, I think it is. It is.
Right.
And it's an ongoing process.
Always. For like even the greatest of the greats,
Absolutely.
they are always in the pursuit of learning.
Absolutely right.
Right. So, on that note, I'd like to end this conversation. And I'm sure we learned a lot of great knowledge and we gained a lot of knowledge from Aditya Khandwe ji. It was an absolute delight speaking to him, and he gave us so much valuable information. And I'm sure that the goal of this podcast, which was to learn through conversations, has definitely been accomplished. I feel that through this conversation, we have learned that music can inspire different parts of life, and just the discipline required within music and to learn music is such an important part in teaching you life lessons. And on that note, I'd like to thank Aditya ji for accepting our invitation. It's genuinely such an act of humility for him to accept our invitation as our podcast is in its baby stages. A huge and such an amazing classical artist like him, for him to accept our invitation is really a big deal. And I'd once again like to thank him for coming onto our podcast and giving us some absolutely amazing knowledge. And to all our viewers who have stayed till the end, and to all our listeners who have stayed till the end, I'd like to once again thank you all. And I hope to see you all in the next episode of Mindful GB.